We're going to look at a variety of alternative flavors of join now. The first of which is called an inner join, which is really something we've already seen, just with a different syntax. So if you look at the first query at the top of the screen here, that's a query we've seen before, more or less, where we're joining sailors and reserves in the from clause. In the where clause, we see we're joining them on boat ID, and in the select clause, we see that we're taking all the columns of sailors and the boat ID column from reserves. There may be some additional where clause predicates in the and, which we're ignoring here. On the lower half of the screen, we see an equivalent query. It computes exactly the same thing. And the main change you'll see is in the from clause, we're saying sailors inner join reserves on, and then we give the join predicate s.sid equals r.sid. And then again, whatever we had after and in the first query, we now just put after where in the second query. So this inner join is just a different way of writing a join of two tables with a particular where predicate. That where predicate moves to the on clause, of inner join, and the inner join is an infix notation. It's between the names of the two tables for a two-table join. Okay. Now that might seem like a weird construct for you, or you might find it to be very natural. Some people prefer it, other people find it odd. It's an equivalent syntax to what we've just seen. The reason inner join was introduced, though, was to make it one of a few options of kinds of joins. So let's look at some more. The more general space of variant joins here is in the from clause, we can either have an inner join on some qualification, or a natural join on some qualification, or one of three different types of outer join, left outer join, right outer join, or full outer join on some qualification. If you just say join, we're going to assume it's an inner join. So that's the default. And as we said, inner join is what we've learned so far, just as before with a slightly different syntax. But now we have to learn about inner, natural, and outer joins. So let's go through them. For inner and natural joins, it's basically the same semantics we've had up to now for regular joins. So here we see at the top, the first of these three queries is our sailors reserves join, where we're joining on s.sid equals r.sid and s.age greater than 20. The second version of the query is the inner join version, where we say from sailors s inner join reserves are on s.sid equals r.sid, where s.age is greater than 20. Those two are equivalent. The third query we haven't seen before. So in the from clause, we're saying from sailors s natural join reserves are. And you'll notice there's no on clause in the natural join. The where is the same as it was in the inner join, and the select list is the same as it was across all three. These three queries are equivalent. Natural join is a special case of inner join where the on clause is automatically computed in the background as equalities on the matching column names. So you see in the second query, the column names match s.sid equals r.sid. In the third query, we don't even bother saying them because the only column names in common between sailors and reserve are SID. And so implicitly, natural join is the same as inner join on s.sid equals r.sid, because those are the column names that match across sailors and reserve. If there had been other columns across sailors and reserve that were common, that had the same name, then the natural join would have included those as well. So be careful using natural join. It's going to pick up all the matching column names across the two tables and add them to the inner join's on clause, essentially. Okay? So that's natural join. Generally speaking, natural join is not a good idea to use because if you add columns to tables over time, or if you remove columns or rename columns in tables over time, natural joins will break, and they might break in unpredictable ways. So I encourage you to avoid using the natural join in general. Okay, now let's look at outer joins, beginning with the most common case, which is the left outer join. Here the idea is we're going to return the same thing as the inner join, all the matching rows, and in addition, we want to preserve all the unmatched rows from the table on the left of the join clause. So if there is a tuple on the left-hand side table that has no match on the right-hand side, we still want it to be in the output once. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill in the right-hand side columns for that tuple with null. So looking at this example query, where we're joining sailors left outer join reserves on SID equals SID, we're going to return all the sailors and BIDs for any boat in any of the reservations. But in addition, if there's a sailor in the sailors table that has no reservation that matches, That sailor will be in the output once with their SID and their SName and a null BID. Right outer join is the same idea, but here we're going to preserve tuples that don't match on the right-hand side of the join. So again, we return all the matched rows, as in the inner join, but we're preserving the unmatched rows from the table on the right. So looking at the query here, we have reserves right outer join boats on BID. And this is going to return all the boats and the SID for any sailor associated with the reservation for that boat. If there's a boat that has no reservations in the reserves table, then we're going to have r.sid as null, but that boat will show up once with BID and bname filled in and r.sid as null. The full outer join preserves tuples from both sides, so it returns again all the matches as in inner join, but it returns any unmatched rows from either side with the nulls filled in appropriately. So here's the same two tables with a full outer join here. It's going to return all the boats and information on reservations where there's a match. If for a reserves tuple there's no match on BID in boats, then we'll return that tuple once with r.sid and fill in BID and bname with null. If there's a boats tuple with no match in reserves on BID, we'll return a row with r.sid as null and the BID and bname for that boat.